Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Dawson. Welcome to Leader Talk. This show is proudly brought to you by Brainiact. Each week we are meeting with incredible leaders from around the world to discuss all things leadership and business insights. Each person coming on this talk show has given up their valuable time for one very clear purpose: to give back to small and medium business owners. Now, have you ever wondered if you have what it takes to be a great leader? Well, today, my guest co-host, Roger Jowett, former Motion Asia Pacific CEO and current Brainiact mascot franchise partner, and I are fortunate to chat to our guest speaker, Larry Robertson. Larry is a globally recognized leadership advisor and speaker with more than 3 decades of experience, guiding some of Australia's most high-profile leaders, including Mark Bouris and Westpac CEO Peter King. Larry helps current and aspiring leaders around the world be their best and give their most. And Larry is here today to teach us all how we too can be great leaders. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Hi, Roger.
Hi everybody.
We are really excited to learn from you, Larry. But before we start asking all our leadership questions, we have 2 fun icebreaker questions we'd love to ask you. And these are usually the most difficult questions. Your first one: what advice would you give to your younger self about leadership, knowing what you know now?
It's a lovely question, isn't it? To me, leadership's about people. And I think I was fortunate enough to realize, or perhaps not realize, but be exposed to people from a very young age, not just one's friends, but one's parents' friends. And so got used to dealing with people who were sort of older, let's say. I think schooling, education, travel, and so forth also gave me the opportunity to interact with different sorts of people. So people, to me, is the most important thing. That it's never about you, and I'll probably say more about this later, but leadership is not about the leader. It's about the impact that we have on others, indeed for their benefit. So realizing that, I think teamwork that you learn from school, teamwork is critical. Without another team, you're not going to lead anybody. So it's therefore important to understand that about people, it's about teaming, it's about purpose, but understanding sort of who are we, why we're doing what we're doing, and where we're trying to get to, and what does that success look like. Fundamentally, those are the things that I think are fundamental to leadership, and it could have probably been helpful if I'd really seen them written down for me simply as clearly as I've said when I was maybe 10, 12, 15 years old.
You make it sound so simple, but I'm sure there's tactics and things that you will teach us about later to help us put it into action. And the second question we have for you: outside of your professional life, what hobbies and activities do you enjoy that help you unwind and stay creative?
Well, yes, I'm a sort of an age now where I'm not going to go, I'm afraid, doing marathons and that sort of stuff. So I used to run a lot when I was young, not in any particular notable way, but running was always important to me from school days, university, and the military. I grew up in the hills of Scotland, and so the countryside is something that I have a great affinity for. And I think I've realized, funnily enough, as I go older, and partly through my wife, that the importance of being close to the soil and working in the soil and getting one's hands dirty is critical. So at the weekend, if I get the chance, rather than when I'm not running around and trying to look important and smart and deal with important and smart people, I'm usually in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt or whatever, getting my hands dirty, driving my small tractor out here on this little farm and planting things and trying to keep them alive, growing things, fattening cattle. And I love working with stone. I love working with wood. So I'm down in the creek doing all sorts of things as well. So just getting physically focused and I think just taking one's mind totally off all the other stuff that goes on around one's life every day.
Wonderful. And now, so our audience knows a bit more about you, Larry, I gave a really, really quick intro, but I know we know there's so much more to you. Can you tell the audience a bit about yourself and your career?
Awful. I just said to you earlier, I don't really like talking about me. But anyway, I was very fortunate with my upbringing. It was, I mentioned, the hills of Scotland. I had a, I think, pretty happy family, the youngest of 3 boys. Good schooling, university, didn't work very hard at university. My father realized that, sent me off around the world with a one-way ticket to Tokyo when I was trying to get to Sydney, but then his instructions were, ticket to Tokyo, when you get to Sydney, let me know, I'll put some money in a bank in Sydney for you. So that was an interesting experience at about 19, 20 years old. And so I did grow up and met a lot of interesting people. First trip to Australia, a bit of red dirt in my fingernails, working in the Pilbara in the northwest, probably stayed with me. So came back to Australia a few years later, both in my military career. So I joined the army, 6 years in the army all over the world. Was very lucky to work with who was then the most important man in the British forces, the Chief of Defence Staff, extraordinary experience. So I get to the Pentagon, I get to Downing Street, in my mid-20s, meet some pretty important people in NATO, etc. So again, really taught me in many ways for what I do today, dealing with pretty important, very senior people, but realizing that even the most important people in the world have frailties. None of them, nobody's perfect. So that was a reassurance in a way. And then advertising, I then was lucky enough to join this extraordinary advertising agency, what was then regarded as the world's most creative agency. And I went, boy, I got the job, essentially in the book. But again, total opposite to the army. Army is quite linear in that direction, advertising quite flat that way. And my first boss, I'm pleased to tell you, was a woman. She was my age, and a marathon runner, and pretty smart. And her boss was a woman, and there were diversity, not just in gender, diversity. The head of strategy was in a wheelchair since he was 2. And we had people from all over the world. So my rather plummy British accent was sort of just blended in somehow. And I just adored that place and became an account director eventually. And then I married my Aussie wife, and we came here and set up my advertising business that I sold, not for a fortune, but sold it. And then what the hell do I do? Frankly, what am I good for? And then we might talk about that later, but how did that sort of self-leadership exercise, which I cover in the book, brought me into this space 30 years ago. How can I help people in leadership positions or aspiring to be leaders be as best they can be, and recognizing, well, what is leadership and why is leadership important and what does it look like and how do we help people get there?
Staying on that topic, Larry, you mentioned earlier on, some qualities of good leaders or what you've learned. Can we just, so that this kind of stays with our audience listening in, can we just take it all the way back and in your experience, just define what you think the good quality, what makes a great leader today, especially for small and medium business owners? And perhaps there's no difference between small and medium business owners and corporate leaders. Keen to know your thoughts on this.
Well, thank you. And I think I would say there's not a lot of difference. I mean, obviously there is in terms of scale, of course, but in terms of the persona and in terms of the purpose and in terms of the execution and if you like, the who, the how, and the where, there's really no difference. As you know, this book that I've just been released today, which is quite exciting, but a bit nerve-wracking, this book I've written brings to life what I believe, in my view, are the 3 core qualities of what I call true leaders. There's lots of people in leadership positions, but unfortunately, in my experience, and one of the reasons I wrote the book, they would seem to regard themselves as leaders through their own, somehow through a divine right or some sort of personal position that they deserve or occupied. And they don't really lead. They manage well, they don't really lead. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So the 3 qualities to me are, first of all, who are you, which is around the authenticity quotient or quality. And that's really about trust. Without trust, we're dust, as they say. And so the important thing is that trust is critical. We actually trust the leader. Now, I can think of plenty of occasions in corporate world we've read about recently, mentioned names, in the political world, we simply just don't trust the people in leadership positions. So there's an issue around that. So how do we come across as more trustworthy and be more trustworthy? I mean, what are the elements of trust? And as I refer to, let's say, the authenticity quotient or quality. The second core quality is respect. And that is, to me, about valuing the people you're with and appreciating the people you're with and recognizing with you. They don't have to listen to you. So why should they? And I codify that as the quality of empathy. And that is putting oneself completely out there and thinking about them and the impact this has about them and what motivation they have or concern they have, listening better and so forth. So the really emotional connection that goes on there. So I pun a bit on, obviously, emotional intelligence, and I use empathy as the EQ, if you like. And then thirdly is the IQ, or the intent quality, which is the purpose. What are we doing here? Why are we doing it? Where are we going? What will that look like? How will we get there together and succeed? So those are the three, to me, the three core qualities: mutual trust, respect, and purpose, codified in my book as the three Qs of authenticity, empathy, and intent: AQ, EQ, IQ.
And Larry, tell me, you'll have seen a lot of egos, I would imagine, out there in the senior leadership landscape. Have you seen great leaders with big egos, or predominantly great leaders with very small egos? What's your take on that?
It's a lovely question, Roger. I'm afraid we do see egos rather a lot, do we not? Almost every day you can read about people with egos, whether it's in the political domain, whether it's in business professions. We can think of a well-known professional services firm who I actually have an affinity with overseas, not here, who've gotten themselves into trouble, and I would regard ego as a lot of to do with that. Politics seem to be driven with people who seem to be self-important, too important to answer questions. I mean, it's just ridiculous. We put them there, for God's sake. So can they please answer, decency, respect, answer a question. Basic stuff that people get terribly self-important. I don't get quite why. I mean, as I said, I was fortunate enough to work with the Chief of the Defence Staff, the most important man in the British forces, for 2 years. I went everywhere with him, everywhere. And I went with Washington, it was across the road to Downing Street, NATO, elsewhere. We had a retinue of people. I had a staff of 30. We had private jets, helicopters, people saluting left, right, and centre. But there was no ego in this person. Mm-hmm. I just could feel the humility. Incredibly smart man, and very bright. And obviously one respected hugely, and very credible, and great experience from his experience in the wartime and so forth. But there was no ego. And I could go further if you'd like me to here, but I don't want to keep banging on. But I can think of an example where one very large corporation was a complete mess and was turned around by a new CEO that came around, and with absolute selfless behavior, focus, determination, got this organization back on its feet. This organization employed tens of thousands of people. It had lost the complete confidence of this country and overseas. Share price was halved. And he brought him from overseas. And I just was proud enough to work with him. I mean, not that he really needed me, but we did work together on what I call a charter, the sort of story of the organization and what that would look like in the future, which is incredibly important. And watching him and how he behaved and how he connected with people, some of the first things he did in terms of connecting with employees, shareholders, customers, of course. One of the most lovely things he did, and then I'll stop talking, was when he was coming down for his interview and then got the job from the board, and he went back to the country he was coming from and get sorted out. He met with the CEO, current CEO, acting CEO's executive assistant, who I knew, called Rosemary, and he said, could you send out a memo to the top 70 people in this company? He hadn't met any of them. A memo, top 70 people in the country. And let them know that I'll be here taking up my position in a month. And I'd like them, in time for my return, to fill in 2 sheets of paper. The first one is who they are, of course, what they do, what value they add, and how they can fix this company. And the second one is a bit more about their background, their skills, their experience, and so forth. If they haven't got much to put on the first page, I'm not interested in the second page, so I'm not to bother. I remember I had three of those on the group executive contacting me saying, how do I put this together?
Right. Yeah.
Well,
they do say people copy the leader. Yes. I think if there is big ego, the culture becomes potentially undesirable versus that humility and in touch with people, and it breeds itself, doesn't it?
Well, I think what happened in that company was that they were such a large organization, they could almost do no wrong in the eyes of so many people, that they believed their own hubris, whether it was the executive team or the board. And they were fated everywhere they went. And up until really 2 or 3 years earlier, things were going pretty well. But then they started divesting. They started buying offshore, changing their business model. They lost clarity and lost sight of where they were really going, what they really stood for. And they got really just too big and out of control. And as a result, everything fell apart.
So really what you're saying, well, I guess for anyone listening in on this and that they know they have quite a big ego, Larry, if they're listening in, is there anything specific they can do to, because, I mean, how do you stop being egotistic? It's hard, right? Is it something they have to do? Do they train themselves to, put that aside?
Natalie, and we all have to have a bit of self-belief and but equally self-doubt. And I probably have rather more self-doubt, surprisingly enough. A lot of surprise a lot of people. Which is probably why it's taken me such a long time to write this book. My father did say I'd be a late developer, and he was probably right. And it's the point that it's not about you. And all you need to do is look in the mirror every night, frankly, with a toothbrush sticking out of your mouth, and really just think about the day you just had, and think about the engagements you had, and how did you make your points clearly? Did you listen well? What's the feeling you left people with? And why should they want to work with you? Why should they want to? Not because they have to. We all have to earn a crust, unfortunately, pay the bills and so forth. But why should people want to work with you? That's a choice. And look in the mirror and think, am I really good enough for these people? Yes, you're probably smart. You're highly qualified. Pretty well off, perhaps, being pretty successful. But it's never about you. Leadership is not about position. It's about disposition. And the more as a leader you focus outside on the people around you, whether they be on the factory floor, whether they be licking the stamps or loading up the back of the van, or people, the customers, of course, and the investors, but focus on them. You're there to help them succeed. And if you help them succeed, you will succeed.
You mentioned, Larry, something just in a few questions before. You mentioned there was a difference between managing a team and leading a team. Can we just touch on that? I know there's a difference, but just so our audience understands, there's difference between managing and leading, correct?
Yes. I think good leaders can manage, but they probably lead better. And in my book, I do touch on this. And what is the difference? And we often hear the difference. And you'll hear various phrases like, managers do things right and leaders do the right thing and so forth. And that's probably true. I think management is all about measurable, quantifiable aspects. We've all been brought up to be managers since we were probably small kids. Tidy your room, run a bit faster, get a better mark in the spelling test. And so it goes on all the way through our school days into university and degrees and so forth, or some qualification of some kind at TAFE. And then we end up at, in maybe some business and maybe get rewarded a bonus for our efforts. But they're all measured. That's management. And what we need to be able to do, and I work with a lot of people who have to then try and sort of move across from still managing, if you like, looking at it from your point of view, sort of, if you like, left, not losing sight of that, but also starting to think about leading. And as I've said to people so many times, if no one's listening to you, then no one's following. If no one's following, you're not leading. So come back to my question, and indeed the title of this book, why should they? And this is much more about not just your smarts, which to me is sort of 25%, your competence, if your capabilities, if you like, 25% of your authenticity. The other three parts of your authenticity are much more humanistic. They're around your character, your values, your frailties, your humility, your humor, your courage. Who are you as a person? Who do people know you for? And who do you bring to work every day? So that's what they want to know. They want to know that person. And then there's the next aspect of that is, of course, is confidence. That is there a sense that you have a belief in what you're doing? By all means, as I learned very early on in the army as a young officer, you're not the fountain of all knowledge, and quite likely the people around you are more qualified or more smarter than you. And in my case, I don't think I've ever worked with people who are not smarter than me, frankly, whether they're 18 or 80. And I celebrate that. And I've often said that I'm probably the most stupid person in the room, but can I, perhaps I can just mention something. And so it's recognizing that the secret, as I've said already, is the people with you and around you, and again, making them feel safe to speak up and challenge, contribute their thoughts. You don't have to accept them, but at least listen. Your job at the end of the day is make a decision, yes, but as a leader. But you need to get people on board to the point where they feel they will be listened to, that they can contribute. Because very often, as you know, and small business would know this only too well. I have two small businesses. I have my tiny business, but we have a business here on this farm where people come and visit, and my wife does lots of different things, and we employ some people here. So I know only too well that about keeping an eye on who we bring in terms of our personality and character, the belief in what we're doing, with humility to recognize we're not infallible, that we're happy to take advice and support from other people. And then there's the competence I've mentioned, but also then there's consistency. And if we're sort of inconsistent, if we don't do what we say we'll do, then people start not believing us, not trusting us. So that's the sort of just area around the who we bring. And I could go on around the how and the what, but perhaps just pause there. So if you like, management is important, critical. We've got to put things together and manage and measure how we're going with them. But leadership gives us that sense of purpose, why we're doing this, where we're going with it, how we'll get there. So, if you like, and perhaps the three questions that anyone should ask themselves, and I think this could be useful for the audience. In terms of leadership, who, why, and where. In terms of management, how, what, and when. And if you put those three together in that order, who, why, where, how, what, when, and again in the book, and I can happily talk about those, but those, I ask myself those questions every day. And when I'm about to walk into a client office, I'll ask myself those questions, and I'll just rattle through them. And
Larry, can I just ask you about the notion of letting go? I see many small businesses where they hit a sort of ceiling where their business is going well, they're managing to keep a finger on most of the levers. They've got quite a high level of trust, but they might have tried and then failed to let go of a significant piece of the busy week's workload to move into this leadership space where you're getting a bit more strategic and thinking and empty chunks of your diary. So this notion of letting go, I'm curious about your experiences and discussions with leaders about how they have perfected that or struggled with that.
Yeah, that's again a lovely point. And I'm probably as guilty as the next person in terms of mindful business and wanting to control everything, but you can't do everything. And if you're serious about growing your business, then you can't do it all on your own. And growing businesses means selling more product or services. And again, you can't be everywhere. So you need people to work with you to do that. And that means, yes, having a strategy of some kind. So having an idea what the business is and what it stands for, and what business, obviously what industry we're in or sector we're in, what's different about it, what's the market, where does it fit in the marketplace, and as I say, what's it stand for in terms of values and standards, and what's special about it, and then purpose, why does it really exist? Why is this business important or interesting or useful, or what difference does it make? And where's it trying to get to? What is your vision? What is your ambition? And how will we do that? And part of how we're going to do that with the strategy is, of course, I'm going to need some people to help me. And recognizing that whatever the drivers are to take that business forward, whether it's marketing people, with production people, with distribution people, technology people, manufacturing, whatever it might be, I need to find people in these spaces to do these things, and they need to come together. I need to create a team. A team which is absolutely based on trust, which respects each member, respects each other, and we're all aligned around a common purpose and vision. And that's not easy to do. But again, it's having the confidence to let go, as you said, a wee bit. It's about delegation, and which is around giving people clarity around what the task is and why it's important, and what success is going to look like, why you've chosen him or her to do that task. Are there maybe some people going to help? What are the other factors he or she might need to achieve that task? What are the expectations from you in terms of, say, the outcome, but maybe along the way in terms of reporting and communication and checking on the progress? But equally balanced with not micromanaging. And we all know people who can't let go and micromanage. And that annoys people because people want to feel trusted and respected and allowed to get on with it. They may stuff it up, but that's part of that trust thing, that we need to let people have a go. And if they make a mistake, they make a mistake. They've hopefully learned from it. Ask, well, what did they do? How did it come across that way? And we have to help them make sure it doesn't happen again. But that's it. That's the only way we're going to learn. I mean, I have failed on occasions. The only way we learn is through failure.
Yeah. And I think leaders telling stories about their failures and their successes to give balance, that none of us are perfect. I would imagine that's a common trait of some of the great leaders you've worked with.
It is, but again, it's a lovely point, Roger. You don't hear a lot of that, actually. And it goes back to really why I started this business 30 years ago. And I mentioned background, army and so forth, UK, and then advertising agency. Came here, started this advertising business. I then sold it, much to my surprise. Someone wanted to buy it, not for a fortune, but they wanted to buy it. That was nice. And then we had at that time was a big recession here in the 90s, and unemployment was about 14% or so. Interest rates were 17% plus. And what am I going to do with myself? I'm virtually unemployable, and I had a very ordinary degree from arts degree, and didn't have a lot of connections here. Didn't go to school, university here. My wife was doing pretty well with her decorating business. That was what she was skilled in. But I thought, well, what am I all about? And again, touch on in the book. But what I recognized as I thought about, yes, it's about outcomes, people, leadership, what I've been trained in, I think, but also head and heart, sort of military, but also advertising. I realized that the people I'd met in business, without being unkind, were not very inspiring. That they were decent people, worked hard, well qualified, and so forth. But I wasn't excited by them. And I thought, well, I don't find them very exciting, these people. I don't think they're very excited about what they do. And well, they're not very excited about what they do. Why should anyone else be excited about what they do? In other words, why should people want to work with them or buy from them? And I thought to myself, looking back on my still pretty young career at that point, I was fortunate, even from school days, university and army and so forth, advertising, to meet with people who were leadership roles, who were inspiring, they were engaging, they were exciting. They were, some of them, completely off the wall, but they were challenging and you got you to think. And encouraged you, and they were generous of spirit and so forth. And I thought, well, how do I help these people in leadership positions here that I've come across? And I don't make this a blanket statement, but the ones I've come across, how do I help them be better leaders? And I realized that communication, of course, is 80% of a leader's job. As I've said, if no one's listening, no one's following. If no one's following, you're not leading. So how do we get people to be more engaging, to be more empathetic, to be more purposeful in the way they communicate with their followers? Recognize, I said already, that people don't have to follow. People can go somewhere else. People can buy from somewhere else. And if we're not excited, if we're not inspired, we're not enthused, and we don't feel a sense of purpose and where we can contribute and what that might mean for us, and not what we're going to get out of it just financially, but what we're going to get out of it in a sense of pride and ownership, collective ownership. If that's not there, then most of us are going to go somewhere else.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Larry, for the audience listening, and they're acknowledging perhaps they're not the best leader and they can improve a lot. Can people be taught to be great leaders? Now, we often hear the question, are you born a great leader, or are you taught to be a great leader? Love to know your thoughts on that.
It's a lovely idea or thought. And I'm not a great leader, I think. We'd all learn. I learn every day. I think I'm a reasonably good leader. I'm trained to be a leader, I suppose, in the military days. But everything we do is about leadership. To me, leadership is not just, having a grand title or the car park space or the corner office. In a way, I'm leading you now. And through this camera, I'm leading the audience. Leadership starts with leading people's thinking. It's what I call a leader of thought, which is different to thought leadership, which in a way is this book, of course, that's sort of thought leadership. An article or type of thing, that's thought leadership. But a leader of thought is taking somebody somewhere. And that's where leadership starts, is getting people to think about something, positioning something in a way that interests people. And then you interest them, and then you move on and you then influence them, which is around getting them to feel about it, feel comfortable with it, start to be interested in it, be intrigued by it. And then finally, get them to do something, which of course is inspiration. You inspire them. So it's about thinking, feeling, doing. Now, all of us can do that. I haven't been a friendless person yet. Maybe there's a few lawyers on this call, in which case I appreciate you have a problem. But most of us have friends. Sorry, I have a battle with the legal profession, but I do have a few legal clients, so I've got to be a bit careful. There's just too many lawyers in this country, in my view. But seriously, all of us are incapable of engaging somebody, whether it's just a mate we strike up a friendship with, somebody we go to the pub with, somebody we might go to the footy with, somebody we might actually end up living with, partnering with. And on what basis do we do that? And it's really no different. The who does that, the circumstance is different, of course. But the you that does that is going to use the same tools, the same approach, the same concepts around mutual trust, respect, and purpose that you need to do in the workplace. And so the good news about this is that what I'm talking about is something that we actually do already. All I managed to do was shine a spotlight on us and say, this is not some high fandangle, sort of intangible, wonderful thing called leadership that you only get from Harvard or Stanford or some business school, let's say. We can all do it. And some of the leaders I've come across are leaders maybe at the reception desk in a client office. He or she is a leader. It could be the car park attendant. It's how they engage. It's how they make you feel. It's going to the shop or the cafe, the way they connect with you. So again, this is not magic, but it's being able to codify what is it we actually do, and then take it into the workplace. Now, the difference with the workplace, of course, is that often people are there because not necessarily a choice, or that it's a bit different to just picking up people we meet and start to build friendships, or connections, or choosing the lawyer or the accountant or something. That there we do have people from different backgrounds, very probably, people who are pretty smart or think they are, have different skills and personalities. And so it's a more of a challenge. But again, we need to be able to connect with them in the way we connected with that person in the cafe or at home. It is that one-on-one connection. It is showing interest in him or her, being curious about these people. I would say, rather than being frustrated, and we all get frustrated people, try and be fascinated. Everyone has a story to tell. Everybody has a story to tell. And so let's try and understand people, what makes them tick, and be interested in them, being curious and so forth. And then, trying to perhaps seek their advice, their thoughts, their help. I have had so much help in this job over the years, so much support and encouragement. I could never have done it on my own. And none of us will succeed on our own. That we need people to work with us and support us, and just as others do. And if people feel safe with you and feel that you're actually there because you're genuinely interested in them, and that you want to work with them, that you want to curious about what they're doing and have a bit of a laugh, and not try and prove how smart you are, but maybe it should be quite vulnerable. And I've had CEOs which will walk around their head office, let's say, and play a bit of a game, and they'll go and sit down on a workstation with some 26-year-old, and they say, "What are you working on?" And we got this new transformation, whatever technology. I'm really struggling with that. Could you show me how to do that? Well, of course, the CEO knows pretty well what's going on, but he's empowering that 26-year-old. By making that 26-year-old feel a bit special, he's showing the CEO, and he then talks about that. A sandwich at lunch, let's say. And it's simple stuff, this is not rocket science, but it requires effort. It requires mindset, attitude, and people don't take that to work, unfortunately.
Yeah. And Larry, maybe just on that theme, if people are soaking up ideas and tips of ways to become a more authentic leader, that notion of practice, just jumping in and not making mistakes and seeking feedback. Have you got stories around that with some people who've told you about their transition from mediocrity to greatness?
Yes, I could mention that CEO I mentioned earlier, that big company. He's an engineer by training. I remember we talked. He's pretty introvert guy, and he was not particularly outspoken, didn't shine greatly at university or whatever. Just got on with the job, but loved his work. Worked for a big corporation overseas. Fortunate enough to become the CEO there, but the humility of this man was extraordinary. You just could feel it. He was running a huge corporation, huge, and yet I see him in the lift just chatting to people, making the effort. I've seen other CEOs in the lift not talk to anybody. What a wasted opportunity! Just looking at their iPhone all the way up and down the lift. How silly! So we can practice this stuff every day. I've had people kindly say to me, I've helped improve their marriages. Well, my marriage my wife's not here, but she would tell you, it's certainly not the world's best. It's okay. I think she's survived me 36 or 37 years now somehow. It can be a lot better. But I know that if I apply some of my own ideas and tools and thoughts in this book to that marriage, to her and to my children, the relationship improves immeasurably. But unfortunately, it's so easy not to do that because we get so wrapped up in our own work. We got our own issues, and whether it was missed the plane or the train, and we had a problem at work or some other crisis happened and we're just not feeling well, that inevitably that we sort of focus on ourselves. And we've got to somehow find a way of, when we walk, and I've said to people, when they get out of that car in the car park, or they get out of the train and they walk across the road into their business or whatever business it is, they are on. And I use the phrase, give 100%. It's tiring, I know. It's hard work. But give 100%. You know, if you want 100% of them, I'm going to give 100% of you. That's simple, really.
Yeah.
And what about, Larry, leading in like difficult times? You know, we all face difficult times, whether we're a leader or not. And often when we're faced with difficult times, it becomes harder to even be a great leader. Is there any advice you have for actually leading a team during a difficult or challenging time to deal with that, to lead with authenticity and still have that trust there?
Yeah, again, and I think, imagine right now, I mean, you know, some businesses are doing it tough. There's no doubt about it. With interest rates the way they are all over the world, not just here, all over the world, and the uncertainty that we're faced with both here, but particularly geopolitically. These are uncertain times. And I lie awake at night occasionally. That sort of bewitching hour, sort of 3 or 4 in the morning. But I think what I've learned is, and I think the success is, and having helped others get through this and seeing people who've got through it on their own or from other help, is getting back to the core about who are we as an organization, or who am I as a person, who are we as an organization, and what do we stand for, and why do we exist? That sort of true north feeling. And if you haven't already worked that out in your business, then it's much more difficult. You need to have that charter, if you like. And in my book, I've given an example of my personal charter, but I also refer to, there's a document in there which is how I've done it with businesses, and you'll see some examples of that. That if we have that clarity of purpose, we have that clarity of brand, if you like, and belief, that's the most important thing. Now, we may have to cut things back, and we may have to change the strategy. That famous thing, which again I refer to, no plans survive the first shot, as it were. Plans can change, have to change sometimes, and being flexible. But the purpose doesn't change. Why you're there doesn't change. And normally the vision won't change, where we're going to. But we may have to cut our cloth a bit. We may have, unfortunately, let some people go. But we need to believe in who we are and what we're doing. And we need to be humble and open. And our team, coming back to what I said earlier, the team need to feel safe. And we need to brainstorm and come up with ideas. You're not the fountain of knowledge. You don't need to be the fountain of all knowledge. You don't need to be the person who has all the answers. In fact, it's best not to be. But you need to encourage people and empathize and empower people to see what they feel and what they believe in. So there's some practical things we need to do, unfortunately, like keeping an eye on the costs, of course. We're doing the same thing here right now, keeping an eye on costs. Annoying as it is, frankly. But we've got to keep going. We still have debt here and so forth. And but equally, it's that core belief in what difference do we make? What reminding oneself also from a resilience point of view. And I've done this many times. You've had the odd bad meeting. I mean, I do a lot of public speaking. Occasionally, I stuff it up, frankly. And I think, oh God, it wasn't me. And people are very kind, but I just know it wasn't. I could have been better. But then I think back to the times I got it right. I can do this. And so can most people. We can do these things. We're doing okay. We've got great feedback from your customers in a small business. You've got good feedback from your people. You've got very loyal people. You've got people who maybe are not so loyal, then probably they should go. But to create loyalty, you've got to give them loyalty. And they've got to feel part of something special. And I look at, I do visit small business. I live in the Southwest, as I've told you, the other side of Camden. I mean, I'm surrounded by small business. I'm in and out of small business. I'm told I keep some of them going, mainly because of my repair bills for my machinery. I mean, I break things here all the time. But I know those people. They know me. They say there's nothing being built that's Larry-proof. We have a good laugh about it. I'm in there, whether it's the engineering or the irrigation people or it's the newspaper shop, and also paint people. I mean, all sorts of businesses. And I just go there with a smile. I go there to give more of myself and to seek advice and help and make them feel they're making a difference. And I thank them for what they're doing.
And
People don't
give
thank
us
you.
get back, Larry. This is one of the things that I think is quite strong in our little community. The more you can give, the more likely you are to get something back. Yeah.
It's the law of reciprocity, isn't it? And I think it's so true that people choose who do business with, as I said, and people like people who are not up themselves. I use that very vernacular phrase, and who are clearly because they enjoy doing what they do, they believe in it, as I've said. They have a level of competence, but they're not trying to prove how smart they are. They can be a bit vulnerable if need be, but equally they want to engage with people and share some thoughts and ideas and hear those thoughts and ideas and be curious about those people and build a bit of a plan together. I think that's, again, I mentioned this property here. When we first took this place on, I told you I bought it with as a derelict wreck here. Just you could not live here. It was a completely overgrown mess, no running water, whatever, from the early 1800s. People thought I was mad. Most of all, my mother-in-law, followed by the bank manager. But the wife somehow agreed to move to the western suburbs from eastern Sydney, but that was fine. And the people we had here to help us do this stuff, at first thought we were completely bonkers, over-capitalizing all that stuff. But I remember a really huge guy to come and do the massive fencing for us and a big iron bar. He turned to me one day, and he's a really tough guy. And he turned to me and said, I thought you were completely mad the first time I first met you, just some sort of guy from the UK for a bit of money and whatever. But actually, I realized what you're trying to do, and I'm excited about what you're doing.
Yeah. I
can feel what you're doing. And I'm proud to be contributing to that. And I thought that's so lovely. I mean, this guy is 6'7" or something, could have picked me up in one hand. And yet here was somebody, sharing a real, just spontaneous emotion. I didn't ask for that. And it was, it was really heartfelt. You could feel it. And that from moving from just coming to do the job and, this guy's got a pompous accent, he got a bit of money, probably do the job. He actually wanted to make a difference. That's what this is about.
It's a common theme, Larry, where you always say it's the purpose that drives. It's the purpose that helps you, your purpose that helps you overcome challenging situations. For anyone that is listening in and, they're an electrician, but they're not really sure why they're an electrician, or they're a hairdresser and they don't know. Yeah. They just go there and do hair. They haven't actually, and I've come across businesses where they don't have a mission statement. They don't have a vision statement, let alone their purpose, or, values is another story. But if they were to just come away from listening to this and go, okay, Larry's told me, I've learned that I need a purpose. Is there something they can do to help them create this purpose? Or how difficult is it to work out what your purpose is? Whether you're that electrician running a small business, how can he or she work out what their purpose is?
It's a great question. And it took me a bit of time to work out what mine was. And again, in the book, I have this charter, which is there and I think we can all, and I've given the framework for that, so everyone can put their own charter together. But equally, that applies with a bit more detail. It applies in the book on what I call strategic narrative, which is like the business. And it starts with, sort of who are we as a brand? And I think if an electrician, let's say, and we have an electrician coming here quite regularly, so electrician, and so who is he? Or it's a one-man band, so let's call him John. And so John, I'm an electrician. This is trade, fine. And maybe a specialty in what type of electricians he does, maybe a specialty in certain types of electrical work. And then it's sort of, okay, so therefore the market he's in. And then why is he doing that? Yes, you could argue it's earning a crust, of course. We've all got to earn a living, and he went to TAFE and got a qualification. But you think about the real why. The real why is actually he is taking the pain out of people's lives. I mean, he's enabling a property, whatever property it is. I mean, we have a dairy across the road here, and they have endless problems with electricity here, and they're milking 350 cows. One of the last dairies working in the Sydney Basin, but one of the last few. And you can imagine the purpose of the people they use. I mean, they have quite a big job. Thanks to them and fixing the electricity, and they are delivering milk and dairy products to hundreds and hundreds, thousands of Sydneysiders, let's say. So they're putting food on the table, or enabling breakfast, let's say, things like that. So, but for me, that electrician comes here, he solves problems, he puts a smile on my face, he makes sure the things that we want to work, like this computer system here, do work, that I can run my business because of him. Without him, it wouldn't work. And because we have power cuts here quite often, he does have to come back occasionally, unfortunately. So I feel he's there, going back to the fencer guy, he's there not just come and do the job and send me a bill. He's there to enable my success. And I think going back to the electrician, that's what they do. Going back to the hairdresser. Now, I mean, again, I get a haircut occasionally, but I don't go to a hairdresser. Well, actually do go to one with both guys and girls in the city. But I know, even from a shortcut haircut like mine, I feel good about it. So I walk out the door feeling a bit better than I did walk in there 40 minutes earlier. And there's a sort of, in a sense, of pride. And I'm sure that's true for ladies or guys who've had, a bit more hair than I've got, and maybe color or some sort of style of some kind, that they feel good about it. Well, that's what the hairdresser is doing. It's doing a great job, I'm absolutely sure. But the difference that she is making or he is making to that customer or that client is they're putting a spring in their step. They're making them feel good about themselves, which means they're going to go, that individual's going to go out and maybe engage people more, maybe succeed more in terms, it could be from a business point of view, it could be maybe from a potential love point of view, suitor, I don't know. But they're going to help that person with their personal presence and their personal feeling and self-esteem. That's the difference they're making. Now, I'm not putting those in words right now, but just think about it like that, rather than just, I'm doing a great job as a hairdresser, as good as it would be.
We all have a purpose, don't we? It's just working what the purpose is in your business to be your driving force. Larry, I want to ask, we've been talking about great leaders and good leaders. I want to flip it and just ask about common mistakes leaders make and perhaps how to avoid them. From all this extensive experience, I mean, you've come across some brilliant leaders. I'm hoping you've come across a couple that make common mistakes that you could possibly share with our audience, or, tell their story, just to kind of, so we can aspire what not to be. We know how to be a great leader, but now let's learn from, let's not do this.
Thank you, Natalie. I mean, I've touched on it a bit already. So ego, obviously, that Roger mentioned is probably rule number one. Just get rid of it, gone. There's no room for ego. And when I look at organizations that get it wrong, and I could mention a well-known airline that we all know and love dearly in this country, the ego that has driven that organization, both at the management level, but the board level, which is still writ large, and their AGM, I think, is tomorrow. Is it on Friday? Well, the board should resign, in my opinion. They should all go. And the ego that's driven that organization, and the hubris, and the self-importance is nonsense, frankly. I mean, and there are many customers, which I'm one, who've suffered with that. And many employees, as we know, sacked illegally, by the way, who suffered with that. So that's all the result of ego and all about self-aggrandizement and self-reward, unfortunately. So that is a huge mistake that people fall into the trap of. And unfortunately, the reason is because I've seen it all too often, that people get into these senior positions, and I'm not just talking big corporations, where people don't dare say boo to them. They don't dare say, your collar's up. You spilt the gravy on your tie. They don't dare say any of that, let alone that wasn't you, that you didn't handle that meeting very well. Or I don't agree with that. They didn't do any of that. And so where I think I've made my mark, and sometimes at sort of a risk to myself, and I've actually said it to CEOs, I'm going to speak up and be difficult. And sometimes they've said to me, you were out of order. I said, I know what, but someone has to say this. And it's much easier you sack me. I'm only here, for a few hours or a day, I think, than one of your employees. But what a pity that your employees don't feel safe enough to say the same thing with a sense of humor, with a smile, not being rude. And I think people say, I wish people would. And I said, well, you're not making it safe for them. That's why. You're not seeking feedback. So seeking feedback from one's peers, from one's group executive, from your team, how did that meeting well? What do you think? What can we do better? What can I be doing better? None of us are the source of all knowledge and wisdom. I mean, we're not infallible. So we're a team. I worked with a well-known AFL club years ago, and the captain was actually the wrong captain. Lovely guy, but the wrong captain. And I had to point that out to the management. I mean, they didn't like it, but I'm really sorry. He's a wonderful guy, a great footballer, but he's the wrong captain. So mistakes around sort of self-belief and overblown self-belief, you like, self-importance, and people not being able to tap him on the shoulder and say, mate, you're not that good, actually. That's number one. I've seen others again where related to that, where they just somehow believe because they are smart and because I remember thinking one which I touched on in the book, where they're on a board where there's been a takeover, and they somehow feel because they have position on the board that everyone can listen to them. Well, no, and you're new, probably a bit younger than some of the others, and what about a bit of respect? What about going in there and learning and listening from the other people, and recognizing that you're the new person on this board, and not being in a hurry to push your own idea, as brilliant as they may be. So it is, again, I think, about just recognizing this is a team. You're not going to succeed on your own. And you need to have with people around you who feel safe, as I said, who feel comfortable with you, who feel respected by you, who feel appreciated by you, whoever they are. And that they feel that they're going to come to work with you, because it's the people thing that goes wrong. And then you look at, well, okay, investments that went wrong. But again, it's people made mistakes because either hubris, or they lost sight of where they were really going, or they suddenly thought, well, I've got to get the share price up, so I better get back in that position. Well, very short-termism. And again, they're probably straying away from their core purpose. They're straying perhaps even from their vision. And so I think we just need to calm down and think, well, we all make mistakes. Let's be honest about it. It was like me breaking a vase or something here. I've got to fess up. I stuffed up. I broke something. I got it wrong. And what did I learn from that? Well, I've had CEOs apologize, saying sorry. I mean, the lawyers say, can't say sorry, can't apologize. Nonsense. Everyone knows there's a mistake. Everyone knows what you've done. If we're talking about authenticity and trust and credibility, just say you made a mistake. And that's the same for a small business. You stuffed something up. I don't know whether it was getting a speeding ticket, whether it was leaving the security off one night. I don't know. You stuffed up. Because you will win more trust and more confidence in yourself from your people around you. And you're showing them more respect by just admitting you're not perfect. Sorry.
So Larry, that's showing the vulnerable side of leaders, isn't it? And I think that's something you see commonly in the great leaders. They do open up.
I wouldn't say commonly. I've already mentioned one good example. I won't go back there, but I can think of others where it's not common. I mean, really not common, sadly. And it's a real shame. I mean, I mentioned earlier, I mean, I am probably overly self-deprecatory. I mean, it's partly my sort of British upbringing. I think I don't take myself very seriously. I take what I do very seriously and who I do it with. But I've had CEOs say to me occasionally, be a bit careful about that, sort of the way you do yourself down, Larry, because, we're a very engineering organization and we're very literal here. And people might just believe that you haven't got any belief in yourself, and therefore they won't take you seriously. It was good advice, I do remember. But I'd rather be that way and then quietly prove myself, i.e. under-promise and over-deliver, than the other way, where we over-promise and under-deliver.
Yeah. Very good. What was and that? Can I just ask about the book briefly? Who's it targeted at? Who should be buying this book?
Well, it's a lovely idea. Thank you. I'd like lots of people to buy it, but I suppose if it's a sort of businessy type self-help book, probably people mid-20s, maybe 60, 50, that type of thing. Probably business people of all, whether they're big or small or whatever. But it's holistic. So people, as I said already, people have said to me, it's improved my sort of life more holistically. So that's what I would like people to feel. This isn't just a business book.
Okay. And you can dip in and out of the book, can you? Or is it a read it from start to finish?
I'd be very surprised people read it from cover to cover. I had to do an audio recording a few weeks ago, and it was 17 and a half hours in the studio. I thought, and they drilled it down. They drilled it down to 7.5 hours. I thought, well, God, nobody's going to listen to me for 7.5 hours. My dulcet tones. So, I mean, I think you can, this little introduction and explain what it's all about. Then the three big sections, which are the AQ, EQ, IQ, which all comes under this concept of the three qualities of true leaders. And then within that, there are probably about 8 or 9, 10 stories in each. You don't need to do them all. But the stories, some of them are interesting, some of them are amusing. I've obviously disguised to a degree. They're not all about this business. Some of them my military days, some of them my advertising days. But there are little lessons after each story. There are little takeaways and things. And then it brings it together, a toolkit at the end around the communication aspects, some of the things I mentioned already just now. And then there's a section on pitching to win, pitching your ideas. I mean, I do a lot of work in the area in the helping organizations win business, because that is leadership. You're leading your potential customer or client on a journey to the point where they say, I want to work with you. So the same sort of ideas come through, but putting it under the heading of pitching. And then I bring it together at the end. And my charter, as I mentioned, is right at the end.
Very good. Thank you.
And just for anyone that's going to listen to this as an audio and can't see the book behind Larry, the title is Why Listen to, Work and Follow You, the 3 Qualities of True Leaders.
That's right. I can put it up there. So you can put it up. You can see. So it's why you, and then the bit is why listen to, work with, and follow you. And then it's the subtitle is the 3 Qualities of True Leaders.
Excellent.
And Larry, the audio book is your voice.
I'm afraid it is.
Who else was on the shortlist for the voice? You won the.
Well, I don't think I'm going to get an Oscar anytime soon. But I think we agreed that a bit like writing the book myself, a bit like you can't get it as a reason. Having tried, it's not going to work getting a ghostwriter. I was advised by the publisher these sort of books are best. The audio record is best done by you. These are your ideas. These are your models. It's your stories. Whereas people often use an actor for, say, a novel. That makes sense.
Okay.
But for this with me.
Well, it's the imperative authenticity. And I suppose when you're reading your own book, it's going to come.
I have
Roger, authenticity.
Can I just add on that point of authenticity, because it's quite important. I have a phrase I call appropriate authenticity, and I think that's important to recognize. That we have core values, core characteristics, core personalities, and our family, our friends, they know this. What's good about us, what's not so good. And again, none of us are perfect. But we respond to situations depending on the circumstance. So if somebody came in here right now in tears, clearly they're going to get a very different, well, hopefully get a different Larry than you're getting right now. Mm. If somebody comes in here, a bottle of champagne, it's a bit early in the day, but who knows? A bit of a smile, that's great. What's happening? Let's go and celebrate. So a different Larry, appropriate to the circumstance. Yeah. And so this flexing, if you like, of which Larry, Roger, Natalie, do we need to be right now? And that's why it's so important to know who we are and be comfortable, that self-awareness about who we are and what we're good at, if you like, but equally what not so good. It's under pressure, where do we tend to go, obviously. But then be focusing out, giving 100% out. So that we are really reading the room, in inverted commas, reading the individuals, reading the periphery around what's happening, and being able to respond appropriately as people expect us to do. They have expectations of us as a leader. Which Larry are we going to respond with? Whatever's going on in the back of our head, whatever problem we've just had, or row we've had with somebody, or whatever crisis going on in our lives, they don't want that. They want the Larry that's appropriate now.
That's brilliant. And Larry, one thing we did forget to mention is where can we purchase your book from? Have you got a website or is...
Sweet of you. Well, no, best it's published. It is being published by a publisher, so it's not self-published. So it's Booktopia, Amazon, of course. So it's being released today. Amazon, Booktopia, they have it, and I hope the major bookstores. I know some bookstores are going to have it. So I hope I'll see it in a few bookstores. But if there's a problem, people can get in touch, and then my email address. You probably be happy to share that. And we do have some books here that I'm allowed to sell out, and we have to put postage on it. But apart from that, we can do that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Larry. I've learned so much. I mean, we could keep going, but Roger, I'm looking at time.
Oh,
are you ready for a...
How long have I got? How can I summarize the last hour in...
I know, good luck.
Less than a few minutes.
Roger always has the tough bit, Larry, of summarizing the main points our guest brings to the show. It's tough.
Relax, Larry. Sit back and relax. So listen, what a fantastic hour talking with, obviously, Natalie and Larry Robertson, the ex-runner from the Scottish Hills, now the tractor driving guy on the farm in southwest Sydney. And he came to Australia with the one-way ticket to Tokyo. We haven't heard about how you got from Tokyo to Sydney. That's for another time. But what a wonderful fountain of knowledge in terms of all things leadership, which Larry's given us many insights into. The things I've written down are about leadership being really all about people and the impact that leaders have on others, the importance of teamwork and building a sense of purpose as a leader within the team that you lead. The notion of leaders being fragile. You know, we talked a lot about ego and how that's a big trap not to fall into. And the notion of fragility is also important to recognize. And I think this blend of your military and advertising career and DNA is just fascinating. It's just got this perfect balance of how to look at things through different lenses. We've got some great takeaways, you know, the persona and the purpose of the leaders. managing well versus leading. We've been through that. I think people start to get used to this key difference that needs to be understood. And a lovely phrase that without trust, you only get dust. Appropriate authenticity, you can't fake it. Yeah, this has to be something that comes from the heart. And of course, we have trust followed by respect, and then purpose. And along with those come the empathy and the intentions that we have. This lovely balance that we need to find between self-belief and self-doubt. So not the arrogance and the overconfidence and not the shrinking leader in the corner, finding this balance that helps us to pivot from, tough decisions to celebratory moments. A great question for us all to ask ourselves: why should people want to work with you, the leader? Yeah. And how leadership is not about the position, but the disposition, the importance of listening skills. Yeah. If people are going to follow you, they want to be listened to. And that's really important. Some little buzzwords here. On the manager is the how, what, and the when, and the leader more about the who, the why, and the where. And I love this discussion we had about letting go and the importance of creating the team and empowering them. It's a really important word. And I've seen many small business leaders just struggle with that simple notion of taking a risk and backing a young person. And when I, as a coach, have had success of nudging a business leader in that direction, it is so fulfilling to see them empower a young 20-something-year-old to take off some of the workload. Learning from mistakes, telling stories, the list goes on and on. Big thing I've written down and underlined here is the notion of leaders being inspiring. And, this communication muscle, it's got to be as strong as you can possibly make it. And that means go to the gym and really use it to its full extent. You cannot be a good or great leader with poor communication skills. That's pretty clear cut. And this notion of purpose, and with purpose comes pride, a lot of talk around that, backed up by leaders being leaders of thought. Yeah, getting people to get their creative juices flowing, feel that they're contributing to the success of the business. And I love the idea of, give 100%. If you want 100% from your people, how on earth can you not give anything other than 100% yourself? Tough times, stick to the vision. Yeah, just cut your cloth to suit and share the problems with your team. You'll come up with some solutions to navigate tough times, but don't abandon your vision or your sense of purpose. We talked about the pitfalls. Ego is the big one. Not seeking feedback. Always seek feedback. Usually our partners are the best ones at giving us feedback, but certainly the people who you work closely with should be very good at helping you to improve in certain areas. Not trying to do it on your own, and not being short term. It's a long game. Most businesses can navigate choppy waters. Appropriate authenticity is one of the key things that I've sort of taken away as well, Larry. And I think we should all read the book, the AQ, the EQ, and the IQ. So wonderful to spend an hour with you. Thoroughly enjoyed it, Larry. And I wish you every success with the book. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Roger. I think you should be my editor. I would have loved you being an editor.
Roger does brilliant summaries, but we have learnt so much from you, Larry. Just listening to your summary, Roger, just covered it all. It's been an amazing hour. Thank you so much, Larry.
Well, thank you both so much. A huge privilege to spend an hour with you both. And thank you so much for your interest in what I do, which, frankly, I just try and make a difference for people. That's my job. My success is predicated by the success I enable with others. That's really what I do.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Larry. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. For more information on Leader Talk and for some great resources to help your business grow, check out brainiact.com.au. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.